Back together. So when discussing the future of the travel industry, sustainability has been a big piece of that puzzle. Carbon offsetting alone does not provide the answer to the climate challenge. So how can we cut tourism emissions in half by 2030? And what are the pathways for multi-day tour industry to achieve net zero by 2050?
As we already heard Travis mention during his opening keynote, TourRadar has signed the Glasgow Declaration, and with Sophia on board, our head of sustainability, we're working to finalize our climate action plan. And the purpose of that, or the first purpose, is to bring together those players in the industry that are already doing a fantastic job on sustainability. So we want to bring them together and share the best practices that they've been working so hard on doing already. And after all, that's one of the reasons of TourRadar wanting to host an event like Adventure Together, to bring the industry experts together.
To kick off the sustainability discussions, we are thrilled to have Graham Jackson, the head of strategic partnerships at the Travel Foundation, here to lead us in this panel discussion. With the Travel Foundation being the co-author of the Glasgow Declaration, who better to help us navigate the discussion along with some of the leaders in the industry to share some ideas on what they're doing to help achieve the goal of being net zero. Welcome to the stage, Graham. Worked out?
Then I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. You're going to have to do better. So the challenge, as set out in the Paris Agreement, is to reach net zero by 2050, and we need to halve emissions by 2030. So we're going to explore today a little bit around the pathways for the tourism industry, and particularly the multi-day tour sector, towards those goals. So I'm delighted to be joined here by Nadine Pinto, who's the Global Sustainability Manager at TourRadar and the Travel Corporation. A business that has many famous brands around the world, and has been doing a lot of great work in this area. Also joined by Ben Tenson, who is the Director of Global Sales for Explore. And just to say that both Explore and the Travel Corporation were some of the inaugural signatories of the Glasgow Declaration. So a round of applause for them for coming on board at the beginning. And we're also lucky enough to be joined by Charlie Cotton, who's the founder of eCollective. So he has a business that's working with many operators on their climate action plans in terms of helping them measure emissions and really try and improve their impact. And unfortunately, we're going to lose Charlie just after about halfway through this session, because he's going to be running another session in the side room on how to improve your impact. So for those of you viewing at home, in the office, or here in person, it's going to be a great session with Charlie. And don't worry, if you do decide to tune into that or get up and stroll over there, you'll be able to watch this panel again online. So just before we begin, I'm just going to introduce you, for those of you who aren't familiar or haven't looked at it recently, the 5 pathways of the Glasgow Declaration, which, as was mentioned in the introduction, we were lucky enough to be involved in the creation of, alongside the UN World Tourism Organization, UN Environment, Visit Scotland, and a grassroots initiative called Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency that really set the stage for tourism engaging with the climate crisis, in starting to work towards and commit publicly to net zero targets. And so the idea of the declaration really was to align the sector globally with the Paris Agreement, to really create a movement for travel, a way of businesses, destinations and sporting organisations to really make their public commitments around climate, and importantly to start demonstrating some progress, some collective progress towards those net zero goals. And since we launched the Glasgow Declaration, we've got around more than 700 signatories that have signed the declaration. And just to those of you who haven't yet signed it, COP27 is just around the corner next month in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So that's a really good opportunity. There'll be a lot of talk around climate. It's a really good opportunity for you to maybe consider making that commitment and joining this movement. So just to show you the 5 pathways here. So you'll see we have measure and decarbonise. Perhaps a lot of us are already on that journey. But importantly, there are 3 other areas, and perhaps the most important areas of Glasgow. So regenerate. How do we turn tourism into a regenerative industry that really contributes towards some of the solutions to the climate challenge? How do we collaborate? It is a framework for collaboration. What we're really trying to do is pull together the industry to work together, to share best practice, to invest together in this really pre-competitive area. If we don't sort the climate challenge out, we're all in trouble. So it's really about trying to bring the industry together as one. And finance, of course. How do we fund the adaptation of our industry? How do we support destinations that are at threat of climate change to adapt? So I'm going to stop talking now because we've got some fantastic panelists here. I'm going to let them take the stage. And first of all, go to Charlie, because as I mentioned, he's going to have to leave us shortly. So, Charlie, you've been working with lots and lots of businesses in the travel sector, really helping them to understand and manage their climate impacts. First of all, just from your perspective and having the conversations that you have, how would you say the travel industry is generally on its climate journey compared to other sectors?
Well, we work with a few different sectors. We work with a few different industries, the travel sector being the main one. I'd say generally, if you're comparing industry to industry, the travel industry is probably a little bit ahead in terms of generally where we find is mainly employee driven. Most people who work in the travel industry are incredibly passionate about the planet, and they tend to be the main driving force of creating change within that organization. There's also an element of led by the customers making the way, and obviously the very fact of what the travel industry sells. Like, these are the kind of images you get on your website, on your brochures, and these are the very things that we're trying to protect through the work. So it kind of makes sense. I would probably caveat that a little bit, that I'm not sure the word mature would be a good word to use. It's very much, all the businesses we work for, they're all very understanding that this is early days, this is day one of starting to understand your carbon footprint and thinking how can we reduce it year on year on year. And I do think sustainability is a bit of a unforgiving beast when it comes to, it's never really job done. It's pretty unforgiving in that it's, however fantastic you do over the last 12 months, it's time to go again, really, and try and improve on that score. So it's a bit like that. And I also slightly worry about this kind of idea of comparing industry to industry, because there's always someone in there, whether it's in your own industry or elsewhere, that has a worse footprint than you. There's always someone in there who's got a better footprint than you. So there's no point kind of saying, I'm not going to do this because, God, they're awful kind of thing. I'd much rather we all just kind of like focus more on ourselves, whether that's your own individual as a person or your own individual as a business, and thinking, how can I just be better year on year?
So some technical issues in the microphones, but so I mean, just in terms of that, it's really interesting the caveat you just mentioned, and maybe there is some inertia out there. I mean, what would you say you think, particularly looking at the multi-day sector, because I know you've worked with a lot of businesses, you've worked with Explore here on its plans. What would you say the biggest barriers are to making climate commitments, or creating that climate action plan, starting to drive down the footprint of your operations?
Yes, I might.
Oh, you're working now. Yeah.
Sorry. I might have two for that, I think, really. So just general operations, talking to businesses. It's, have they got the time in their day? This does take time. Might not be as bad as you might guess, but it will take time to start measuring and reducing your footprints. And everyone, kind of anecdotally, that we speak to time is like a precious resource, and it's just all kind of slightly chaotic in the summer, and hopefully things are starting to get more rolling. It was interesting hearing Travis kind of use an analogy of like getting the ball rolling and getting everything's kind of up and running again after COVID, and I certainly see that in some conversations we have. The other thing is obviously when it comes to tour operators, most of their footprint is going to come from the very things, suppliers they work with and the things they sell across the world. So in a perfect world, when you buy a hotel for that trip to Timbuktu, they tell you the price, and they would also tell you the carbon footprint of that hotel as well. Obviously, that's not happening at the moment. So the struggle for tour operators in particular is they've got to go out and proactively find out the carbon footprint of all of these different things, all these different ingredients you include on your trips to work out what your carbon footprint is. And that's obviously a huge challenge. It's not unique to the travel industry. Everyone's kind of got this of trying to find out what is in your supply chain. So I would say don't panic on that. It shouldn't be a reason not to start, but being open and honest about it is certainly one of the big challenges that the kind of tour operator field faces.
Yeah, I'm sure Nadine's probably nodding there, thinking about those Scope 3 emissions that you're mentioning there. Thank you. So before we let you go to your panel, I'm just going to put you on the spot and just see if you've got one piece of advice you would like to give, based on your learning, based on working with companies within the travel sector and in other sectors. What would be your one piece of advice to those operators who haven't really yet considered creating the climate action plan or taking that first step?
Well, I would want to say just feel free to reach out and share. This space is hugely collaborative. People are talking amongst each other, even if they're competitors, which is lovely to see. But the one piece of advice, the one thing I really see makes change happen is setting a deadline. Say, I'm going to stand up in front of the office and produce this climate action plan by X date and make that widely known within the organization. Put it on social, say we're going to announce it by this date. Nothing works better than the fear of saying I have to produce something by X date and everyone else knows about it.
That's great, yeah. And I mean, just to say, by signing the Glasgow Declaration, you are making a public commitment to produce a climate action plan within a year of signing. So, maybe that's the way to get, say, we'd like to sign the Glasgow Declaration. If you can drive that and get that business commitment to doing that, you're then aligning with everyone else that's done that, and you are making public that commitment. Perfect. To produce that plan. So thanks, Charlie. Well, we're going to let you go now. So Charlie will be running a workshop on... Thank you. Big clap, Charlie. Thank you. Just to plug his workshop, he'll be running a workshop on how to increase your positive impact. So do check that out either straight after this, live, or watch again later. Then there were three. And really happy to be joined by you both. I think it's fair to say that both of these businesses have been exemplary in their sustainability commitments, have been recognised for it, and really are leaders particularly in this sector, but also in travel and tourism more broadly. And they've got some great stories to share, and I'm going to use the time with them to help sort of lift the lid on some of the things that they have done, and hopefully you will learn from them. And I'm sure they will be also delighted to answer your questions over a wine later. So we'll come to you first, Ben. And I know that your business has been working very closely with Charlie and eCollective particularly on your climate challenge. But what was it? What was the impetus that really made you decide to invest in making that public commitment and taking climate action?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's not so much an investment, but for us, it's really a necessity. The Explore business, I think it's fair to say, cares deeply about the people and the places that we visit, and we've always had sustainability at our core. For 41 years of existence, we've taken small groups to destinations all over the world, and in doing so, leaving a really soft footprint. And I think that we're truly committed to reducing our impact on the planet and really creating a sustainable future. And we believe that our customers deserve to know the impact of their holiday. And that's why we've worked with Charlie and eCollective to measure all the carbon that's associated with running our 500 trips across the globe. And we're putting those footprints, we're putting those measurements next to every trip online so that our agent partners and our customers can make a more informed choice at the end of the day. And then, as Charlie and Graham alluded, we're putting all that methodology online and out there as well so that other travel businesses can follow suit. I think the other thing is that despite the pandemic, we never lost sight of the importance around this topic. I think it just gave us that heightened sense of really what's important. And at a time where there was so much uncertainty in the industry, and even for our own business and what the shape of it would look like emerging from the pandemic, we decided to double down on sustainability. And at the end of the day, you can't reduce what you don't measure. So that's
Thank you so much. Nadine, I'm going to come to you now, if I may. We've known the Travel Corporation for many, many years, and have had the pleasure of working with you on some projects. Most recently on a project around collaborative climate action in Scotland that was trying to bring together the private sector with the public sector to, how can we actually drive climate action at the destination level? And I'd just like you to explain a little bit about the Travel Corporation's journey and its commitment to climate action, and also kind of why you think that collaboration pathway of Glasgow is so important.
Absolutely, thank you. We started our journey on climate action in 2019, and that's really when we took the steps to begin to measure our footprint, both the emissions that we create in our offices, as well as the emissions that we create on our trips. So that happened in 2019, and we had a good understanding of what that footprint looked like. And we introduced a climate action plan in 2021. The climate action plan really focuses on how are we going to reduce our emissions, as well as how are we going to be able to invest in some carbon removal solutions. We also have a Tread Right Foundation, that's the charitable arm of the Travel Corporation, and we invest in carbon removal solutions that way. But just quickly at a high level, our decarbonization strategy. So our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are those emissions that we own. They come from our offices, our vehicles. So we're looking at how do we secure renewable energy at our offices. We have a beautiful selection of hotels called the Red Carnation Hotels. We're looking at how do we transition that to low carbon appliances and things like that. The third that we look at is our Uniworld ships. So these are river cruises that go throughout Europe. Obviously, they use a lot of fuel, but what does it look like 10, 15 years from now? Are we going to be able to transition those river cruise ships? That's something we're looking at. And then the fourth area that we're looking at is we do own vehicles ourselves, those coaches. So how do we source and secure zero-emission vehicles? And can we start building partnerships now that we can see vehicles when they come online in 5 to 6 years? So that's everything that we own, which is a lot. And then we also have our indirect emissions, our Scope 3 emissions. And as Charlie was talking about, those are the trip emissions. And we operate in 70 destinations, a little bit more than. So of course, we're going to need collaboration to be able to work with the destinations to help lower the carbon footprint of those trips. The great example that I was fortunate to work on the Travel Foundation with was Visit Scotland. It was really a collaboration between Visit Scotland and ourselves at the Travel Corporation. But it was really exciting because it was the first time that a DMO and a tour operator were talking about things that go beyond marketing relations. We were sharing what our net zero goal is, what their net zero goal was, and we both realized we needed our suppliers, that's the accommodations, the experience providers, the tour operators within Scotland, to be able to get on board with the net zero principles. And it would obviously be helpful if we had Visit Scotland to be able to support that message and say, oh, by the way, some of your big suppliers, such as the Travel Corporation, are going to start asking you questions about what type of renewable energy are you using? What kind of low carbon technologies have you adopted? So that's kind of where our conversations went, and we're continuing to have them. How can we influence that supply chain to adopt net zero principles, knowing that we do want to reduce our trip footprint in our destinations?
Thank you. And I think a really interesting thing around that project was, thinking about the infrastructure and how that might need to change in destinations to allow, a company that offers coach tours to places to be able to bring. It's not just about you buying new vehicles. You obviously need to be able to charge them up. So we need to start those conversations early on in order to end up where we need to get to. And I think just Scotland itself has made a commitment to get to net zero by 2040. so a full 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. So obviously, they're really thinking about how can we accelerate that journey as well. And I think they were delighted to be able to work with the Travel Corporation to help them think that through and how they could involve the private sector. So going back to you now, Ben, I'd just like to, obviously I know it's difficult. This is not something that people sort of jump into thinking, yes, I'm going to create my climate action plan. How exciting. It's a necessity. It's kind of part of business today. Investors might be looking for it. Customers, there might be the threat of regulation in the future if we don't start our journey. What was the sort of hardest part for you in terms of your business, and how have you overcome? How are you starting to overcome some of those challenges?
Sure. Well, I think the hardest part for us actually starts now, because we've put those measurements out there. They're on our website. They're next to every trip for every agent partner, for every customer to view. So now we need to hold ourselves to account to reduce those, right? And I think it's important to recognise that we're not always going to get it right, but certainly for us, we want to be completely transparent, and we want to share our sustainability journey as well. I think the hardest part so far, and Charlie alluded to this before as well, that the hardest part for us was emerging out of the pandemic was really difficult. Obviously, it was really difficult for everybody, but when we had sustainability and this carbon measurement project at the top of our agenda, accessing the micro level of detail that we needed across our 500 trips globally was a real struggle. I think it was 10,000 lines of data and a real project, but accessing the level of information or the ingredients, as Charlie put it, to build those measurements and so that they could build accurate measurements for us was certainly a real challenge. And I think then moving forward for us, the challenge for us is to work with our DMC network for them to fully understand what our sustainability goals are, so that we can continue to work collaboratively together to find better alternatives to running our trips and running them in a more efficient way.
Thank you. So, Nadine, back to you. Not every operator, is as big as the Travel Corporation. Perhaps has the resources that you do, and not everyone is lucky enough to have a Nadine working for them on this as well. But have you got any advice to operators that may not have that expertise in-house? They may not have the resources like you have to be able to start taking climate action.
Absolutely. Everyone can always do something. I would say there are very simple calculators available online for you to be able to measure your direct emissions, South Pole, Carbon Trust. You can just go onto these calculators, enter maybe how much electricity you're using, how much fuel you've used for your office, and it'll spit out your carbon footprint. So now with an understanding of your measurement, you can identify what are those things that I could do to reduce that emission. Could I implement a business travel policy where maybe everyone has to take rail, or some of the really great things that TourRadar is doing today, like the meatless snacks that we had, the offsetting opportunity with Globus. Like, these are things that we can be doing to reduce the footprint, but it's really just all about understanding what is your footprint, and once you understand that, you can help reduce. The other thing I wanted to note is that Ben and I obviously work for bigger companies, and we had to get these complex Excel spreadsheets that measure the emissions from our trips, and I love those Excels, but they're complicated. There's also several tools that help you measure trips available, and they're free. Carmical is one that comes to mind. There's a few others that you could look at as well. Joining the Glasgow Declaration, I think you guys have a whole list of resources available to you. So being able to sign that declaration and just joining this community of people who are taking climate action in the tourism industry is just the first way to go, for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, and I could talk to you for hours, but let's just come to the last questions that I have for you now. So, offsetting, has historically been the sort of go-to climate action route for many, not just in tourism, but also in other sectors. So I'd like to ask you, Ben, kind of what role do you see offsetting playing in your strategy, and how do you think about it as a strategy in its own right for achieving net zero?
Yeah, sure. So it's obviously only part of the solution. For us, it's there's far more benefit in building a really meaningful climate action plan. But in saying that, like my trip here will be carbon offset. I tried to get here by rail. It was going to be 13 hours to get here from the UK, which wasn't going to work. But I did make it work to a conference last month in Basel in Switzerland. It was 6 hours from the UK, and I have to say, a really enjoyable, smooth journey. But it's certainly not easy. Offsetting, I think, is just one tool to act against climate, and I think it's important, and it's for businesses to act responsibly. They need to take action against their current carbon emissions as well, and clearly working with gold standard offsetters like Climate Care, who we use to offset their current emissions, is the quickest way and the most efficient way to do that at the moment. And we've been offsetting all of our trips globally now with Climate Care since the start of 2020. So there's still a role for it, but a more meaningful climate action plan is the way forward.
Thank you. So we're at the TourRadar Adventure Together events. So I'm just going to flip the spotlight, I guess, here on the booking platforms, and just ask you what role you feel that they can play in helping the sector to achieve net zero. Obviously, apart from platforming this important discussion at this important event.
Yeah. I think it's all about amplifying as well. Like, we're having this discussion today. I think there's resources that I've mentioned before that can be amplified on the platform. I think highlighting those organizations and those businesses that are taking net zero steps really just pushes the laggards in the industry to understand that this is something we value, and we want everyone to get on the net zero journey as soon as possible. The other thing is the OTAs are the experts in data and telling us what customers want. We want to know that they want to book sustainable. We want to know what kind of carbon offsetting they're doing, if they're doing anything. Do they understand what net zero means? Those sorts of things. So I think just collaboration and being able to share that data with tour operators would be helpful as well.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we just have a minute for any final thoughts from either of you. So is there anything I haven't asked you'd like to share right now? Now you have the stage, or...
I mean, we want to take a leading role in the industry in getting all of our trips to carbon neutral. Clearly that's about reducing the carbon on those trips and then offsetting the rest. But yeah, we want to take a real meaningful role in getting to that position as quickly as possible.
Awesome, thanks. And you, Nadine?
Probably just the only thing that hasn't been touched yet are science-based targets, and kind of these are the gold standard, I guess, of being able to have a decarbonization plan and a strategy to get you through 2030 and then to 2050. So it's definitely a resource that I encourage all tour operators, OTAs, to take a look at. What does it mean to set science-based targets for your organization? It's really going to help you uncover where are the biggest sources of emissions in your business and what you could be doing to reduce that. So check that out.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And I guess I'll just offer one as well, just another plug for the Glasgow Declaration. We are coming up to the anniversary, so all of those businesses that signed, I know you already have your climate action plans, you've already published those, but there will be a flurry of climate action plans being published on the Glasgow Declaration website, which is part of the UN WTO's One Planet Network. So there's a really useful resource right there for anyone that wants to have a look at what climate action plans look like. They are public, so and I know that there's a lot of resources you've also mentioned that are public. You've made your own journey public, and so I encourage you to get out there and look at those resources. And if you're doing good work yourself, then share, because I think there's a lot of appetite out there for inspiration, for advice and ideas. So we'll close it there. Thank you very much, both for your time, and thanks to Charlie and Absentia as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.